Captain pressed her long, blue fingers against the control panel as she watched the dancing lights of the gas giant below. The research station had been her home for 3 years now, studying the strange gases that swirled in colorful storms across the planet's surface. It was peaceful work, the kind that her people loved most. The Ani were not a warlike race. They had smooth blue skin, large black eyes, and stood barely 5 feet tall. Their hands ended in delicate fingers perfect for detailed scientific work. War was something they read about in history books, not something they lived through. "Captain," called her science officer from across the bridge, "I'm getting strange readings from the outer system sensors." Turned away from the beautiful view of, "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures, very large ones, moving toward us at high speed." His voice carried a note of worry that made stomach tighten. She walked over to his station and looked at the display. Even with her limited knowledge of space combat, the readings looked wrong. These were not the gentle energy patterns of merchant ships or exploration vessels. These signatures were massive, aggressive, and getting closer. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. "At current speed, maybe 6 hours." Felt her heart's racing. The Ani had 2 hearts, a biological backup system that helped them survive in their cold. Right now, both were beating fast with fear. "Send a message to Fleet Command," she ordered. "Tell them we need immediate assistance." His fingers danced over his console. After a few moments, he looked up with despair in his large eyes. "Captain, I can't get a signal through. Something is jamming our long-range communications." The hours that followed felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. The unknown ships emerged from hyperspace like predators materializing from darkness. There were 12 of them, each one the size of a small moon. But these weren't normal ships made of metal and plastic. They looked alive. The ships had smooth, wet-looking surfaces that pulsed like giant heartbeats. Strange tendrils hung from their undersides, and their hulls seemed to ripple and change shape as they moved. Looking at them made feel sick. "What are they?" whispered her communications officer, a young female named. Checked their database of known species, hoping desperately that these were just ugly but peaceful aliens. When the computer finished its search, her blood turned cold. "Devourers," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Every spacefaring race knew about the Devourers, though most hoped they were just scary stories. They were a nomadic species that traveled from system to system, consuming everything they found. They ate planets, stripping away the atmosphere and life until only dead rock remained. They grew their ships from living tissue and used captured worlds to breed more of their kind. The Devourers had destroyed 17 known civilizations. They never negotiated, never showed mercy, and never left survivors. "Raise shields," ordered, though she knew it was hopeless. Their research station had basic defensive systems meant to deflect small asteroids, not fight off planet-killing monsters. The attack began without warning. Streams of acid shot out from the bioships, eating through their outer hull like water through paper. The station's small defensive lasers fired back, but the beams barely scratched the Devourers' living armor. Within minutes, their weapons were gone. Within an hour, the outer sections of the station were melting away. Ordered everyone to retreat to the central core, their last safe area. "How long can our shields hold?" she asked the engineering officer. "Maybe 70 hours if we're lucky," he replied. "The acid is eating through our hull, but slowly. The inner barriers should buy us some time." 70 hours. Less than 3 days before the Devourers broke through and killed everyone aboard. Looked around at her crew of 23 scientists and technicians. They were good people who had never hurt anyone. They spent their lives studying gas clouds and atmospheric pressure. They didn't deserve to die like this. That's when she remembered the stories about the sector. Most civilized races avoided that part of the galaxy. It was home to species so violent and dangerous that even thinking about them made peaceful aliens nervous. The rumors said that spent most of their time fighting each other in endless wars. They came from planets where survival meant constant struggle against deadly predators and terrible environments. Normal aliens considered them monsters and savages. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Called to her communications officer, "Do we still have our emergency beacon?" "Yes, Captain. It's powered by an independent fusion cell, but it only has enough power for one transmission." Walked to the communications station and stared at the controls. She was about to do something that went against every instinct her people had. She was going to call for help from the galaxy's most feared killers. Open a channel, broadcast on all frequencies toward the sector. His eyes went wide. "Captain, are you sure? The stories say they're more dangerous than the Devourers." "The Devourers are definitely going to kill us," replied. "At least there's a chance they might help instead of just adding us to their dinner menu." She took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "This is Captain of the Ani Research Station orbiting. We are peaceful scientists under attack by a Devourer fleet. We have approximately 70 hours before our defenses fail completely. Our coordinates are attached to this message. To any inhabitants who might receive this, we know our races have never been friends. We know you are warriors while we are scholars, but if any mercy exists in your violent hearts, please help us. We have children aboard this station. We don't want to die." She paused, then added, "We are not warriors, we cannot fight them, but maybe you can." Sent the message racing through space toward the rim of the galaxy, toward systems marked with warning signs in every galactic database. Now all they could do was wait and hope that somewhere in the darkness, someone was listening, someone who could fight monsters and win. Outside the station's walls, the Devourers continued their slow, patient work of melting through the hull. They had all the time in the world. The Ani did not. 2 days passed like a slow torture. The Devourers worked with the patience of machines, slowly eating through layer after layer of the station's hull. Their acid streams never stopped, creating a constant hissing sound that echoed through the corridors. Captain watched the progress reports with growing despair. 60 hours left, then 50, then 40. Her crew tried to stay calm, but she could see the fear in their large eyes. Some of them were crying. Others just sat quietly, holding hands with their friends. "Any response to our message?" she asked for the 100th time. "Nothing, Captain," came the same answer. "The signal reached the sector 18 hours ago, but there's been no reply." Wasn't surprised. Why would savage warriors care about peaceful scientists? They probably laughed at the message if they bothered to listen at all. Maybe they were too busy fighting their own wars to help strangers. The young science officer looked up from his console with tears on his blue cheeks. "Captain, my sister just had a baby last month. I was supposed to visit them when this assignment ended." His voice broke. "I sent them a picture of the gas clouds yesterday. I wanted them to see how beautiful it is out here." Put her hand on his shoulder. She didn't know what to say. What words could comfort someone facing certain death? That's when the proximity alarm started screaming. The sound was so loud and sudden that half the crew jumped out of their seats. Red lights flashed across every display, and the computer's voice echoed through the station. "Warning! Massive gravitational distortion DETECTED. Unknown vessel approaching." "The Devourers are moving closer," said, her voice shaking. But was staring at his sensors with confusion. "No, this isn't the Devourers. This signature is completely different. It's huge." Rushed to the main display and looked at the readings. What she saw made no sense. The gravitational signature was larger than anything in their databases. It was bigger than a Devourer bioship. It was bigger than a space station. It was bigger than some moons. "That can't be right," she whispered. "Check the sensors again." Before could respond, space itself began to bend. The view through their main window showed the peaceful stars around, but suddenly those stars started to stretch and twist. Reality rippled like water, and a tear appeared in the fabric of space itself. The tear grew wider and wider, glowing with strange energy. "What's happening?" someone shouted. Then something emerged from the tear that made the Ani crew forget how to breathe. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a rock. The vessel was 3 kilometers long and nearly 1 kilometer wide. Its hull was dark gray metal covered in scars and burn marks from countless battles. Massive gun turrets bristled from every surface, each weapon larger than the Ani's entire station. The ship looked like it had been designed by someone who thought that the universe was a hostile place, and the best response was overwhelming violence. Every line of its construction spoke of war, aggression, and absolute determination to survive any fight. "By the ancestors," breathed, "what is that thing?" Her answer came through the communications system. A voice spoke in accented but clear galactic standard. "Ani Research Station. This is Captain Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force Dreadnought Righteous Fury. We received your distress call. Please stand by for immediate combat operations." The voice was female, calm, and professional. It carried the tone of someone who had done this many times before. They actually came," whispered in amazement. Stared at the massive warship as it positioned itself between the research station and the Devourer fleet. She had called for help from and received exactly what she asked for. A weapon of war so powerful it made the legendary Devourer bioships look small. Captain managed to say into the communicator, "This is Captain. Thank you for coming, but there are 12 Devourer ships out there. Each one is the size of a city. They've destroyed 17 civilizations." "Understood, Captain," came the reply. "We've dealt with Devourers before. Please keep your people away from the observation windows. This might get bright." The human captain's voice held no fear, no doubt, and no concern about being outnumbered 12-1. She spoke like someone discussing the weather. Through their sensors, the Ani watched as the Devourer fleet reacted to the newcomer. The bioships turned away from their slow destruction of the research station and began moving toward the human dreadnought. Their organic hulls pulsed faster, like excited heartbeats. The Devourers had probably never seen a ship this large before. To them, it must have looked like the biggest meal they'd ever encountered. "All Devourer ships are changing course toward the human vessel," reported. "They're moving to attack formation." Watched in horror as 12 planet-killing monsters began their approach on the lone human ship. Yes, the dreadnought was large, but it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. She had called for help and doomed brave aliens to die for her people. "Captain," she called urgently, "you should retreat while you still can. There are too many of them." The reply came with what sounded almost like amusement. "Negative, Captain. We didn't travel 800 light-years just to turn around. Besides, the odds are about right." "About right," stared at her communications officer in disbelief. 12 against 1 were good odds. "All stations report ready," came another voice over the human channel. "Weapons are hot. Point defense grid is active. Marines are standing by for boarding operations." "Very good," Captain replied. "Let's show these bugs why you don't eat peaceful scientists in human space. All weapons free. Engage at will." What happened next changed everything the Ani thought they knew about warfare. The human dreadnought didn't charge heroically into battle like the warriors in old stories. Instead, it stopped completely and became a fortress of pure destruction. Weapons that the Ani didn't even have names for began to fire. Massive rail guns launched projectiles at incredible speed. Energy beams that could cut through asteroids reached out across space. Missiles streaked from launch tubes like angry stars. The nearest Devourer bioship took a direct hit from something that made it simply disappear. One moment it was there, pulsing with alien life. The next moment there was only empty space and scattered debris. 11 remaining, came a calm report from the human ship. Looked around at her crew. They were all staring at the display in shock. The monsters that had been slowly killing them for 2 days were suddenly fighting for their lives. And they were losing. "I don't understand," whispered. "How are they so powerful?" Captain's voice answered him, though the question had been spoken privately. "Because where we come from, everything tries to kill you. So we learn to kill back harder." The battle had only just begun, but already the Ani crew realized they had called for help from something far more dangerous than the Devourers. They had called for humans. The human ship called Righteous Fury moved through space like a predator that had found its prey. Captain watched in fascination and growing horror as the massive dreadnought demonstrated why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the sector. "Target the lead bioship," Captain's voice carried clearly through the communications channel. "Full spread, tungsten penetrators. Let's open them up and see what they're made of." The rail guns fired with thunderous silence. In space, there was no sound, but the energy discharge was so massive that it overloaded the Ani sensors. When the static cleared, another Devourer ship was tumbling helplessly, its organic hull torn open like rotten fruit. "Interesting," came a new human voice, probably a science officer. "Their regeneration rate is faster than our previous encounters. The hull breach is already beginning to seal." "Noted," Captain replied. "Switch to plasma torpedoes. If they want to heal, let's give them something that cauterizes." The next salvo was different. Instead of solid projectiles, the human ship launched bright orange spheres that moved like living fire. When they struck the wounded Devourer ship, the plasma didn't just pierce the hull, it burned through the alien flesh, creating wounds that couldn't heal. The bioship's death scream somehow reached them through the vacuum. It was a sound that made every Ani on the station cover their ears in terror. 9 remaining, reported the human tactical officer. But the Devourers weren't helpless. They had destroyed 17 civilizations by being adaptable and vicious. The remaining bioships spread out and began their own attack, spraying streams of acid that had melted through the research station's hull like butter. The acid struck the human dreadnought's armor and simply splashed off like water. "Minimal damage to outer hull," came a board-sounding report. "Armor is holding. Point defense systems are tracking incoming." What the Ani saw next taught them the difference between a species that explored the galaxy and a species that conquered it. The Devourer ships tried to swarm the human vessel, surrounding it from all sides. It was a tactic that had worked against every other species they'd encountered. But as they closed in, the Righteous Fury revealed why it bristled with so many weapon systems. Thousands of smaller guns activated at once. They moved with mechanical precision, tracking every incoming Devourer ship. The space around the human dreadnought became filled with laser beams, creating a sphere of death that nothing could penetrate. 2 Devourer ships that tried to get close were cut apart by the defensive grid before they could even fire their weapons. Pieces of organic matter drifted away, still twitching with alien life. 7 remaining, the tactical officer announced, as if he was counting items in a grocery store. "Captain," called the human science officer, "I've finished analyzing their biosignatures. These are definitely the same species that hit the colony on New Hokkaido last year. The ones that ate those farming families." Captain's voice turned cold. "Affirmative, DNA patterns match." "Well then," the captain said quietly, "I guess this is personal now. Deploy the warheads." Didn't know what warheads were, but she was about to learn. The human ship launched a spread of missiles that looked normal at first, but when they reached the Devourer ships and exploded, something terrible happened. The bioships began to dissolve from the inside out. Their organic hulls started melting and falling apart as microscopic machines ate through their cellular structure. The aliens had evolved to regenerate from almost any damage, but they couldn't regenerate from having their basic biology rewritten. 3 more Devourer ships died in agony, their death screams echoing through space. 4 remaining, the tactical officer reported. They're attempting to retreat. Negative, Captain's voice was final. These things ate innocent families. They don't get to run away and do it again somewhere else. Helm, intercept course. Maximum burn. The righteous fury accelerated with impossible speed for something so large. The human ship moved like it weighed nothing, chasing down the fleeing devourers with the determination of a hunter who wouldn't give up. As they watched the pursuit, listened to the human tactical chatter with growing amazement and fear. Pattern analysis shows they're heading for the hyperspace jump point at coordinates 479, one voice reported. Confirmed, replied another. Time to intercept. 14 minutes if we push the engines to 110% capacity. Do it, Captain ordered. I want them dead before they can warn the rest of their fleet about human capabilities. The chase lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it ended, 4 more Devourer ships were nothing but scattered debris floating in space. The humans had hunted down every single enemy with ruthless efficiency. All targets eliminated, the tactical officer announced. No survivors detected. Excellent work, people, Captain said. Now let's see about those researchers. The human ship turned back toward the research station and realized something that made her hearts beat even faster than before. The entire battle had taken less than 2 hours. The Devourers, who had destroyed 17 civilizations, had been completely eliminated by a single human ship in less time than it took to have lunch. But what scared her most was how casual the humans had been about it. They talked about destroying planet-killing monsters the same way her people discussed research data. To them, this wasn't an epic battle. It was just another day at work. Captain's voice came through the communicator. This is Captain. The threat has been neutralized. Permission to approach your station for damage assessment and medical assistance. Looked around at her crew. They were all staring at her with wide eyes, waiting for her decision. She was about to invite the most dangerous predators in the galaxy aboard their peaceful research station. But after watching what those predators did to their enemies, she realized she had never been safer in her life. Permission granted, Captain, she replied, and thank you. Our pleasure, came the reply. That's what neighbors are for. Neighbors. The word hung in the air as the massive human warship approached their tiny station. Wondered what kind of neighborhood she had been living in all along, and whether her people had been naive to think they were alone among the stars. Outside their windows, the wreckage of 12 Devourer ships drifted slowly past. Each piece of debris had once been part of a creature capable of eating planets. The humans had made it look easy. 3 hours after the last Devourer ship had been destroyed, Captain watched a human shuttle approach their docking bay. She stood at the airlock with her senior staff, trying to prepare herself for meeting the warriors who had just saved their lives. The shuttle was smaller than their research pods but looked much stronger. Like the massive dreadnought, it appeared to be built for war rather than exploration. Even its landing was different, quick, and efficient, like a soldier taking position. Remember, whispered to her crew, these beings saved us. Whatever they look like, whatever they want, we owe them our lives. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and the humans came aboard. The first thing that struck was how big they were. The average Ani stood about 5 feet tall, but these humans towered over them at 6 feet or more. They wore dark uniforms covered with equipment she couldn't identify, and their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing displays. But when the lead human removed her helmet, was surprised to see a woman with kind brown eyes and graying hair. She looked tired but friendly, like a teacher at the end of a long school day. Captain, the woman asked, extending her hand in what recognized as a human greeting gesture. I'm Captain Sarah. Are you and your people injured? No, we're all fine thanks to you, replied, carefully shaking the human's hand. The woman's grip was firm but gentle. "We can't thank you enough for saving us." "Don't mention it," Captain said with a smile. "We happened to be in the neighborhood when we got your message. My medical team would like to check everyone for shock and stress injuries, if that's okay with you." As the human medical personnel began examining the Ani crew, noticed something strange. Despite being warriors who had just destroyed an entire enemy fleet, the humans were incredibly gentle. They spoke softly to frightened researchers, shared their emergency food rations without being asked, and treated everyone with the same care they might show their own families. The human medic examining Young noticed him shaking and immediately wrapped a thermal blanket around his shoulders. "First time in combat?" the medic asked kindly. "We don't have combat," replied in a small voice. "We study gas clouds." "Gas clouds, huh?" the medic smiled. "That sounds peaceful. I'm a bit jealous, actually." As the hours passed, found herself talking with Captain in the station's small conference room. The human captain listened carefully as described their research work, asking intelligent questions about atmospheric science that showed she was well educated despite being a warrior. "You know," Captain said during a pause in the conversation, "I was a before I joined the military. I studied alien ecosystems for 15 years. This surprised. What made you become a soldier?" "The hegemony of steel attacked our research colony on 442B, Captain explained matter-of-factly. "Killed half the science team before our defense forces arrived. I decided I wanted to be the person who showed up to help instead of the person who needed help." The casual way Captain mentioned another alien species made curious. "The hegemony of steel, we've never heard of them." "Really?" Captain looked surprised. "They control about 40 systems in the sector. Big, aggressive species that looks like walking tanks. They love to fight, but they're honorable about it. We have a mutual defense treaty with them now." "A defense treaty with aggressive aliens?" "Oh sure," Captain waved a hand dismissively. "Once you beat them in a fair fight, they respect you forever. Good people to have watching your back. Their engineers build excellent weapons, too." Stared at the human woman. "You have treaties with multiple species?" "Of course. There are dozens of species in our sector. The Empire makes some of the best starship computers in the galaxy, though you have to watch them in trade negotiations. They love a good bargain. The Razor clans are fantastic hunters. They help us track pirates through asteroid fields. The Burning Sands Collective knows more about desert warfare than anyone alive." Each name Captain mentioned sounded more terrifying than the last, but she spoke about them like old friends. "Captain," said slowly, "how many civilizations exist in the sector?" "Active spacefaring species, about 67 at last count. Why?" 67. The peaceful Galactic Council only had 32 member species, and they considered themselves the height of civilization. The sector had twice as many species, and they were all supposed to be violent savages. "We were told that spent all their time fighting each other," said carefully. Captain laughed. "Well, we do fight a lot, but mostly for fun now. The hegemony of steel hosts war games every year, fantastic competition. Last year the Empire's fleet won the tactical simulation bracket. We got second place in the ground assault category." "War games. Think of it as competitive sports but with tanks and starships. Nobody actually dies anymore. We use training weapons and simulation systems. It's great for keeping our military skills sharp and settling disputes without real bloodshed." Felt dizzy. The most feared species in the galaxy held sporting events where they practiced war like her people practiced science. "What about expansion, conquest? All the stories say are constantly invading other systems." "Why would we do that?" Captain looked genuinely confused. "We have plenty of territory in our own sector. Plus, most of our worlds are death traps that would kill normal aliens in hours. I mean, my home planet has storms that rain acid and predators that hunt in packs. It's considered a vacation resort by our standards." The revelation hit like a physical blow. The sector wasn't avoided because its inhabitants were aggressive conquerors. It was avoided because the space itself was so dangerous that only the most extreme species could survive there. "Captain," she said quietly, "why did you respond to our distress call?" The human woman looked at her with surprise. "Because you asked for help and we were able to provide it. Isn't that what civilized people do?" "But we're not part of your sector. We're not your responsibility." "When someone is in trouble, they become everyone's responsibility," Captain said firmly. "Besides, the Devourers were heading toward inhabited systems after they finished with you. We couldn't let that happen." Realized with growing amazement that the galaxy's most dangerous predators had traveled 800 light-years not for conquest or resources, but simply because it was the right thing to do. "There's something else you should know," Captain continued. "This isn't the first time we've dealt with Devourer fleets. They've been pushing into this region of space for months. We've stopped 3 other attacks on civilian targets." "You've been protecting civilian aliens, without them knowing." "Of course. That's what military forces are for, protecting people who can't protect themselves. We just haven't formally introduced ourselves to the Galactic Council yet. Didn't want to scare anyone." As Captain spoke, understood that everything her people believed about the sector was wrong. They weren't monsters hiding in the dark corners of space. They were guardians, quietly protecting the galaxy from threats that peaceful species couldn't even imagine. And they had been doing it without recognition, without thanks, and without anyone even knowing they existed. Outside the conference room window, the human dreadnought hung in space like a sleeping giant. Wondered how many other ships like it were patrolling the dark between stars, keeping monsters at bay, while scientists like her studied gas clouds in peaceful ignorance. The galaxy, she realized, was a much safer place than anyone knew. 3 weeks after the rescue, Captain stood in the main meeting hall of Harmony Station, the galaxy's most important diplomatic center. The massive space station orbited a peaceful blue star and served as the headquarters for the Galactic Council. It was a place where civilized species met to discuss trade, science, and the future of their peaceful alliance. Today, that alliance was about to change forever. "The floor recognizes Captain of the Ani Research Corps," announced Council Speaker As, a tall, elegant being from the Serenity Worlds. "Please present your report." Walked to the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from 32 different species. Above her, holographic displays showed the data she had collected during and after the Devourer attack. She took a deep breath and began. "Honored Council members, 3 weeks ago my research team was attacked by a Devourer fleet. According to all our military assessments, we should have died. Instead, we received help from an unexpected source, the sector." A ripple of whispers went through the chamber. The sector was mentioned in council meetings about as often as black holes or galaxy-eating monsters. It was acknowledged to exist, but nobody wanted to think about it. "The humans responded to our distress call with a single warship," continued. "That ship destroyed 12 Devourer vessels in less than 2 hours. For comparison, the Devourer fleet that attacked the Serenity Worlds 10 years ago took our combined naval forces 6 months to defeat." The whispers grew louder. Ambassador Hen from the Merchant Federation raised his hand. "Captain, are you certain about these numbers? 12 Devourer ships destroyed by 1 vessel." "I have complete sensor logs, combat recordings, and testimony from my entire crew," replied. "But the destruction of the fleet isn't the most important discovery." She activated the holographic display, showing images of the human crew treating her people with gentle care. The humans weren't monsters. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, and soldiers who chose to help strangers in danger. They shared their food, treated our wounded, and asked for nothing in return. Representative Ra from the philosophy world spoke up. This contradicts everything we know about inhabitants. They're supposed to be savage and aggressive. That's what I thought too, admitted. But I learned that everything we know about the sector is wrong. They aren't savage, they're protective. They don't fight for conquest, they fight for survival and sport. And they've been quietly protecting this entire region of space from threats we never even knew existed. The chamber erupted in conversation as the implications sank in. Speaker Os called for order. Captain, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we've been ignorant and prejudiced. We've treated an entire sector of the galaxy as monsters based on rumors and fear. Meanwhile, those monsters have been saving our lives without asking for credit or recognition. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a star map of the local region. The humans told me they've stopped 3 other Devourer attacks in the past year. They've been patrolling trade routes, investigating pirate activity, and responding to distress calls throughout this sector. They're not our enemies, they're our protectors. Ambassador Hen stood up. Even if this is true, what do you propose we do about it? The Galactic Council has never had contact with the sector. That's about to change, said. The Ani government has appointed me as the first official sector liaison. I've received an invitation from Captain to visit their colony World New Sparta as a cultural ambassador. The chamber fell silent. The idea of formal diplomatic contact with was unprecedented. Is this wise? Asked Representative Ra nervously. What if they see it as an opportunity to invade? Before could answer, her personal communicator chimed. She looked at the message and smiled. Actually, I think I can answer that question right now. I've just received a communication from Captain. The chamber's communication system activated, and Captain's familiar voice filled the room. Greetings, Galactic Council. This is Captain Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force. I apologize for interrupting your meeting, but I wanted to address some concerns you might have. Speaker Os found his voice first. Captain, how are you able to communicate with us? Our systems are supposed to be secure. Your systems are perfectly secure from hostile intrusion, Captain replied calmly. However, Captain asked us to provide technical support for your diplomatic network 6 months ago, when solar flares were disrupting communications in this sector. We've been quietly maintaining and upgrading your systems ever since. No charge, of course. The silence that followed was deafening. The humans had been secretly helping the Galactic Council's infrastructure without anyone knowing. We're also providing navigation data for your cargo ships traveling through the Spiral Nebula, Captain continued. Our survey teams mapped those passages last year after some traders got lost, and our medical ships have been responding to plague outbreaks on the rim worlds. Your own hospitals were too far away to help effectively. Representative after representative began checking their personal databases and could see the shock on their faces as they confirmed Captain's claims. The humans hadn't just saved her research team. They'd been quietly helping the entire Galactic Council for months. Why, Speaker Os asked simply, why help us without making contact? Because we weren't sure you'd want our help if you knew it came from, Captain said with a hint of sadness. We know our reputation. We figured it was better to help anonymously than not help at all. And what do you want in return for this assistance? Ambassador Hen asked suspiciously. Nothing, Captain replied immediately. Good neighbors help each other, but if you're interested in formal diplomatic relations, we'd be honored to discuss it. Stepped forward. Council members, I've seen these people in action. They're not monsters, they're the best neighbors we could ask for. They've been watching over us like guardians while we lived in ignorant peace. She looked around the chamber at the faces of the galactic community's greatest leaders and thinkers. The question isn't whether we should establish relations with the sector. The question is whether we're brave enough to admit we've been wrong about them all along. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Galactic Council had voted unanimously to establish formal diplomatic relations with the sector. Trade agreements were drafted. Cultural exchange programs were proposed. Joint defense treaties were discussed. As the meeting ended, received another message from Captain. This one was personal. Captain, your transport to New Sparta is ready whenever you are. Fair warning, the planet was settled by our military veterans looking for a quiet retirement. The local wildlife includes armored predators and acid-spitting plants. Our retirees consider this peaceful. You might want to bring sturdy equipment. Also, the local human children are very excited to meet their first alien scientist. They've prepared a presentation on atmospheric chemistry that they hope you'll find interesting. Looking forward to hosting you, Sarah. Smiled as she packed her research equipment for the journey to the sector. She was about to become the first peaceful alien to visit a human world, and somehow she wasn't afraid. After all, she was going to visit neighbors. 2 days later, as her ship approached the New Sparta system, looked out at the patrol ships that escorted her safely through space. Human vessels moved in formation around her transport, not as guards or captors, but as protectors making sure their guest arrived safely. In the distance, she could see the massive outline of another dreadnought patrolling the system's edge. She wondered how many other ships like it were out there in the darkness, standing watch against threats that peaceful species never had to worry about. The galaxy had always been full of monsters hiding in the dark. Just hadn't realized until now that some of those monsters were on her side.